In 2008, inside a remote Siberian cave, a scientist picked up a fragment of bone no larger than your fingertip. It didn't look like much, but hidden inside that tiny chip, barely the size of a coffee bean, was a genetic secret that would rewrite the entire story of human evolution. This wasn't a Neanderthal. It wasn't modern human. It was something else entirely. Something we had never known existed. For most of recorded history, we believed the story of humanity was relatively straightforward. Homo sapiens evolved in Africa, spread across the world, and eventually became the only human species left standing. But science, as it so often does, interrupted that comfortable narrative. We now know that for hundreds of thousands of years, Earth was home to multiple human species simultaneously, and one of them remained completely invisible to us until the 21st century. They are called the Denisovans, and the more we learn about them, the more extraordinary their story becomes. Denisova Cave sits in the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia, near the border of Russia, China, and Mongolia. For decades, archaeologists had excavated its layers, finding stone tools and occasional bone fragments. In 2008, a team of Russian researchers uncovered a tiny piece of a juvenile's finger bone. It was catalogued, stored, and later sent to Svante Pääbo's genetics laboratory in Leipzig, Germany. What happened next would redefine paleoanthropology forever. The DNA extracted from that bone didn't match Neanderthals. It didn't match us. The evolutionary lineage it represented had diverged from our own ancestors approximately 800,000 years ago. A ghost population of humans, unknown to science, had just stepped out of the shadows. The science that unlocked the Denisovans is called paleogenomics, the sequencing of ancient DNA from fossilized remains. It is extraordinarily difficult. DNA degrades over thousands of years, contaminated by bacteria, fungi, and the DNA of every researcher who ever touched the sample. And yet, Pääbo's team succeeded. The Denisovan genome was not only sequenced, it was sequenced to a quality that rivals modern clinical samples. What it revealed was stunning. Denisovans were more closely related to Neanderthals than to us, yet they were genetically distinct enough to be classified as a separate population entirely. Two species, side by side, both vanished. But here's the question that changes everything. If they disappeared, why do millions of people alive today carry Denisovan DNA in their cells? Here is one of the great frustrations of Denisovan research. We have almost no physical remains. A finger bone, 2 teeth, a partial jaw. From these fragments alone, we cannot reconstruct a face the way we might from a Neanderthal skull. However, science has found a remarkable workaround. By analyzing methylation patterns in the Denisovan genome, chemical markers that control how genes are expressed, researchers have made educated inferences about their physical appearance. The results suggest Denisovans were likely large-bodied, with wide faces, projecting cheekbones, and a low forehead, somewhat similar to Neanderthals, but with their own distinct features. They were not modern humans, but they were undeniably, recognizably human. Denisovans lived through an Ice Age world of dramatic extremes, glacial landscapes, megafauna, and constant environmental pressure. Archaeological layers at Denisova Cave have yielded stone tools, animal bones, and even early ornamental objects, a chlorite bracelet, polished bone beads, that challenge our assumptions about cognitive sophistication. Some researchers argue these artifacts may belong to Denisovans. If true, it suggests they were not primitive background characters in the human story. They crafted objects of beauty. They had culture. They endured for hundreds of thousands of years in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. And they did so alongside creatures we can barely imagine: woolly mammoths, cave lions, and extinct species of rhinoceros. For a long time, The story of human evolution was told as a straight line, one species giving way to the next. We now know it was far more tangled. At Denisova Cave itself, scientists found the remains of a child whose mother was Neanderthal and whose father was Denisovan. A first-generation hybrid, real evidence that these populations met, mingled, and had children together. And it wasn't just in Siberia. Genomic evidence reveals that modern humans who migrated out of Africa encountered and interbred with Denisovans across a vast territory stretching from Siberia to Southeast Asia. 3 lineages, overlapping in time, sharing children. The boundaries between human species, it turns out, were never walls. They were doorways. Roughly 30,000 to 50,000 years ago, the Denisovans vanished. We don't know exactly why. The most widely supported hypothesis involves competition and connection. As modern humans expanded out of Africa in ever greater numbers, bringing with them advanced tools, complex social networks, and adaptive flexibility, other hominin populations found themselves squeezed. Climate shifts disrupted ecosystems, resources thinned. Populations that had survived for hundreds of millennia may simply have been unable to sustain themselves against these compounding pressures. They weren't necessarily defeated in any dramatic sense. They faded, absorbed, displaced, and ultimately lost to time. Except for the traces they left inside us. Here is perhaps the most astonishing part of the Denisovan story. They are gone, but they are not entirely absent. Modern populations in Melanesia, Papua New Guinea, Australia, and parts of Southeast Asia carry between 3 and 5% Denisovan DNA. Indigenous populations in the Philippines have shown the highest Denisovan ancestry yet recorded. And one of the most consequential genetic gifts they passed on is a variant of the EPAS1 gene, a mutation that allows Tibetan people today to live and thrive at high altitudes without the blood-thickening complications that affect most humans. The Denisovans didn't just exist, they contributed to our survival. Their biology lives on in every Tibetan child who runs at 14,000 feet without losing breath. We tend to think of human history as our story, the story of Homo sapiens, alone and triumphant. But the Denisovans remind us that we were never alone. For most of our existence as a species, we shared this planet with beings who were startlingly like us, who sheltered in caves, crafted ornaments, crossed mountains, and loved in some way across the boundaries of species. We carry them with us, in the blood of a Tibetan shepherd, in the genome of an islander on the shores of Papua New Guinea, in a fragment of bone, barely the size of your fingertip, waiting in a Siberian cave for someone to finally listen. The Denisovans are gone, but they are not forgotten, because forgetting them would mean forgetting a part of ourselves and the deeper truth that humanity was always, from the very beginning, a story of many.